Good morning. Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to give you guys Pacific Northwest Sports Weekend Update Week 5. Now, to start it off, your UW Huskies played Rutgers, and they lost 18-21. Now, it's a 5-hour ride in New Jersey on a Friday night, and frankly, it's a tough way to end your night with that 5-hour silent flight back home. Now, Rutgers made sure not to let the Dogs go up 2-0 in Big Ten play to start off their annual season. Jonah Coleman played out of his mind with nearly 150 yards rushing. Denzel Boston added on 125 receiving yards with 2 touchdowns, but 3 missed fields from Brady Gross would end up being the difference in this game. UW has a chance to avenge their national title loss from last year when they play Michigan next week. Your Wazoo Cougars played Boise State and lost 24-45. Now, it's no denying I am a diehard Coug fan, but WSU gave up 7 sacks and they couldn't tackle Ashton Jeanty. It is going to be a long, long year for the Cougs if they can't learn how to tackle. But more importantly, is Ashton Jeanty not the Heisman frontrunner? I get Travis Hunter's playing well. I get Cam Ward is playing out of his mind. But Ashton Jeanty is just ridiculous. He's averaging over 200 yards rushing. I haven't seen a running back be this good in college football since Reggie Bush. Now, Ashton Jeanty in that game went 26 rushes for 259 yards and 4 touchdowns. WSU has a bye next week where hopefully they can recollect, and Boise State plays Utah State next week. Now, your Eastern Washington Eagles played Montana, and they lost 49-52, but it was an absolute barn burner. Combined, they had over 1,200 yards of offense, and it was the Grizz' first win on the Inferno in program history. The Grizz had over 700 yards of offense, and it was a pretty close split of 50-50 rushing versus passing. Now, Eli Gilman became the 13th Grizz to reach the 20 touchdown in a career mark, a 20 career rushing touchdowns. But let's remind people, he is a redshirt sophomore, and he's already there. It's quite amazing. At the start of the fourth, it was Montana 38 and Eastern Washington 21, but the Eagles wouldn't be refused as they battled back and forth, but they just couldn't quite catch up. Player of the game, Logan Fife, who went 30 of 42 for 364 yards and 5 touchdowns. Eastern Washington has a bye next week. Montana, plays Weber State next week. Now, your Central Washington Wildcats played Western New Mexico, and they won 36-0. And it was at home to start the Wildcats off in conference play. I mean, it's amazing. The defense shut down anything New Mexico even thought they could do. And from there, Central just ran their offense to perfection. Player of the game, Kennedy McGill, who went 13 of 18 for 131 yards and 2 touchdowns. Central plays Eastern New Mexico next week. Now on to Oregon. Your Oregon Ducks played UCLA, and they lost 34-13. Now the Ducks opened up Big Ten play with a nice win, but this team does worry me. I don't know if Dillon Gabriel's the guy. Between pick sixes and just inconsistent play, I don't know if he's going to get Oregon to a national title. Make no mistake, I love Dan Lanning, and I think what he's got going over there is huge. I just don't know if the pairing of Dillon Gabriel is the right way to go. Player of the game, Jordan James, who rushed for 20 times for 103 yards and 1 touchdown. The Ducks play Michigan State next week. Now, your Portland State Vikings played Chattanooga, and they lost 30-45. Now, Chattanooga dominated this game starting from the first quarter when they put up 21 points. The Vikings were terrible on defense. In fact, they didn't get their first third down stop until the third quarter. By that point, Chattanooga was already 8 for 8 on third downs. Portland State plays UC Davis next week, and boy, do they need a win. Now, your Western Oregon Wolves played West Texas A&M, and they won 24-16. Momentum comes, and it goes, and it can be at a moment's notice. For example, at the end of the first quarter, 14-0 Wolves. Start of the fourth quarter, 14-9. Scary stuff indeed. But Big Mo would come right back to the Wolves side, as on the first play of the fourth quarter, they would score a 61-yard touchdown. From there, it was just about managing the game and answering when needed. Player of the game, all-conference linebacker Malcolm Lafau, who had 10 tackles, including 3.5 for loss and 1 sack. The Wolves play Western New Mexico next week. Now, your Willamette Bearcats played Simpson, and they won 21-18. Now, ugly football, but a win is a win, and Willamette's going to take it. Down 18-13 with about 3 minutes left, Willamette started a drive. A drive that got set up with Willamette down to the Simpson 12-yard line with under a minute remaining. They would convert through the air for a touchdown, and then from there, they would get their 2-point conversion. From there, the Bearcats would knock down 3 passes on defense and then force the turnover run down on 4th down. Player of the game, Alex Rivera IV. He went 11 of 20 for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, he also had 2 interceptions, but if he can cut back on those, he can lead his team to some amazing wins. Willamette has a tough game next week against a good Linfield program. Now, your Eastern Oregon Mountaineers played Rocky Mountain College and got a win 23-20. In what was supposed to be a fun homecoming game for Rocky Mountain, it just wasn't meant to be. And this is going to sound weird. It was a slow, heavy-hitting game, but also filled with offense. Think 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Eastern Oregon and Rocky Mountain both racked up the yards, but crucial stops for the Mountaineers helped propel them to the win. It also ended up being Eastern Oregon's first win of the season. Player of the game, Quincy Glasper, who went 19 of 30 for 296 yards and a touchdown, but he also rushed 15 times for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. Eastern Oregon plays Arizona Christian next week, and Rocky Mountain plays College of Idaho next week. Your Southern Oregon Raiders played Montana Western, and they won 28-26. Now, you could say the Raiders are the surprise of the NAIA season so far, and you wouldn't be wrong. In fact, they won their second top 10 game this year. Make no mistake, this loss does not kick Montana Western out of the playoffs. In fact, by the time the offseason comes, this might look like a good loss, especially considering how close it was. But time for the analysis. And a back-and-forth game, it seemed as midway through the third quarter that this was put away. The Raiders were done. The Montana Western team was down 20-13, but then Michael Plandry hit Eli Norse for a 23-yard score with 4:02 remaining. Then they had their 2-point conversion failed, but they recovered their onside kick and got another Plandry Norse touchdown. The game was over from there as Montana Western's second onside attempt was recovered by the Raiders, and 3 plays later, they would get a first down to ice the clock. Player of the game, Gunnar Yates, who had 31 attempts for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also became the first Raider since the turn of the century to register multiple rushing touchdowns in 4 consecutive games. Southern Oregon plays Montana Tech next week, and Montana Western has a bye next week. Over to your Idaho Vandals, who played UC Davis and lost 26-28. Now, Idaho scored a touchdown and a field goal in the final 4:28 of the game, but they failed a 2-point conversion to tie the game up. But what do you expect? The Vandals had 2 failed 4th downs and also had 3 interceptions. You can't win games when you play like that. The Vandals play Northern Arizona next week. Now, your Idaho State Bengals played Montana State, and they lost 17-37. Believe it or not, though, it was 17-10 at the start of the fourth quarter. MSU does what MSU does, and they rolled on to a 20-point win. Player of the game, Scottry Humphrey, who had 27 carries, 159 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Idaho State plays Cal Poly next week, and Montana State will play Northern Colorado next week. Now, your College of Idaho Coyotes played Montana Tech Diggers. They won 45-37. But after back-to-back losses, you know it has to feel good for the Yotes to get back in that win column, although it did require some OT and a record being broken. Quarterback Andrew Peters throughout his career has been dynamic, and now the school record showed that he is just as dynamic as we thought. He passed for his 50th career touchdown pass, and he's in the record books now for the most touchdowns for a quarterback over there at the College of Idaho. But let's get into the thick of it. Trailing 31-19 with just over 10 minutes left, Peters led multiple successful drives, including a touchdown run that tied the game up 31-31. He then followed it up with another touchdown drive that put the Yotes ahead 37-31 with just under 2 minutes remaining. Montana Tech wouldn't panic as they led an 85-yard drive for a touchdown in less than a minute. With a chance to go up by 1 after the touchdowns, the Yotes would come up big, blocking the PAT, breathing life into this team as they went into OT. The Yotes would strike first and convert on their 2-point conversion, and Montana Tech had a chance to answer, but they ended up turning it over, allowing the Yotes to celebrate a homecoming win. Player of the game, quarterback Andy Peters, who went 32 of 42 for 419 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also rushed 15 times for 91 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Yotes will play Rocky Mountain next week, and Montana Tech will play Southern Oregon next week. Now over to Montana. Your Carroll Fighting Saints played Arizona Christian University, and they won 28-0. Carroll has that D rolling, and Arizona Christian was held under 200 total yards of offense, and they were shut out. This is Carroll's 3rd shutout of the season. Now, defense travels. Offense doesn't, but defense does. And this could be a key for Carroll being a wrecking over in that Frontier Conference. Player of the game is going to be defense. Absolute domination. Carroll plays MSU Northern next week in what could be another shutout. Now, the Wyoming Cowboys played Air Force, and they won 31-19. A win for Wyoming. And just last week, I was thinking this team may not win a game all year. Now, it was an old-fashioned Wyoming game, and they lined it up with being a battle of 2 rushing teams. So if there was ever a time to get the win, it was right then. Player of the game, Sam Scott, 19 carries, 97 yards, and a touchdown. Wyoming has a bye next week. Now over to Utah. Your BYU Cougars played Baylor, and they won 34-28. But don't let the score confuse you. BYU dominated this game, especially in the first half when they went into the locker room up 31-14. I turned on the game, I blinked, and BYU 21, Baylor nothing. I was absolutely shook. I'd rub my eyes to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I mean, it was amazing. Baylor did get a chance to tie it up late in the game, but they threw an interception 3 plays into the final drive. BYU being 5-0 is a shock to everyone. And I think if you asked any of the experts, they would agree with this. It just wasn't expected. BYU has something special going, and they still have Oklahoma State and Utah to beat, but finishing high in the Big 12 and potentially going to the Big 12 conference title is not out of the picture. Player of the game, Darius Laster, who had 8 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown. BYU has a bye next week. Now, Utah Utes played Arizona, and they lost 10-23. This is nothing we don't know. This Utah team is not the same team without Cam Rising. And they don't have his backup and a strong backup to be competent enough to start games and keep them rolling in the wins. Tough losses like this are going to affect the Utes when it comes playoff time, especially if Cam Rising isn't there. The Utes have a bye next week. Now, the Utah Tech Trailblazers played Abilene Christian and lost 30-55. And if not for 2 garbage time touchdowns for the Trailblazers, the score would even be uglier. Let's be happy they have more games to redeem themselves next year, and perhaps they can pull one off. The Trailblazers take on North Alabama next week. Now, your Weber State Wildcats played McNeese, and they lost 26-28. Now, for some reason, Weber State, when they scored, decided to go for 2 to go up 8-7, but they didn't get it. And then late in the fourth, they were forced to go for 2 to tie it up, and then they didn't get it either. It's a self-inflicted loss. This is the only way to really describe it. Weber State plays the Grizz next week. Now, your Southern Utah Thunderbirds played Austin PA State and won 28-17. It was a close game, but it was in the fourth quarter where the Thunderbirds flexed their muscles and scored 14 unanswered points to win the conference game. Player of the game, Targi Lamson, had 24 attempts, 164 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Southern Utah plays Charleston State next week. Thank you guys for listening. Now, I want to give a little update. Next week, I potentially might be going to a wedding for a friend of mine. And if I do, it's on a Saturday, meaning that I may not be able to get a weekend update out to you. And if that happens, then check on X, check on Instagram. We'll post some updates and have something for you guys to look at. But I did want to give you guys that information just in case. There's multiple other reasons that I may not be able to make it, but I'm excited. I'm hoping that I can make the wedding, and so I'll keep you guys updated and let you know. But to sum up next week, let's just go through the game so everyone has a quick idea of what's going on. UW plays Michigan. Central plays Eastern New Mexico. Pacific Lutheran, that's right. Northwest Conference plays Beck. PLU plays Whitworth. Puget Sound plays Pacific. Oregon plays Michigan State. Oregon State plays Colorado State. Portland State plays UC Davis. Western Oregon plays Western New Mexico. George Fox plays Lewis and Clark. Linfield plays Willamette. Eastern Oregon plays Arizona Christian. Southern Oregon plays Montana Tech. Boise State plays Utah State. Idaho plays Northern Arizona. Idaho State plays Cal Poly. College of Idaho plays Rocky Mountain. Montana, we got your Grizzlies playing Weber State. Bobcats playing Northern Colorado. Saints playing MSU Northern. Utah, you have your Utah Tech Trailblazers playing Northern Alabama. And then Southern Utah Thunderbirds playing Tarleton State University. That is all I got for you guys this week. Have a great time, and I will talk to you next week.